Imagine a world where the sun never rises, where time is not measured by hours, but by heartbeats of fear, where forgetting is law, and every breath might be your last. Noxion is not a planet. It is a sentence, a dark pit carved on the edge of toxic nebulous, where the Empire dumps what it cannot erase yet cannot allow to live. And among these condemned souls, there is one man who carries not only injustice, but a secret that could reignite the stars. The surface of Noxion seems alive, but there is no life there. Only muffled breaths beneath a sky forever veiled by sulfur clouds and cosmic dust. There is no dawn, no dusk, only twilight constant, heavy, damp with silence and echoes. The first images etched into the mind of any exile are always the same: rusted towers jutting out like broken fingers from the earth, dark dunes shifting slowly, as if the ground itself wants to swallow the forgotten. And among those dunes, shrouded in a grey mist, fell Kale Draven. His eyes, still burning with the fury of betrayal, did not seek shelter. They sought understanding. Why did a planet like this still exist? Why hadn't it been destroyed, erased from maps, eradicated from galactic memory? The answer, he would soon discover, was not in the planet, but in what the Empire needed to hide. On Noxion, gravity feels heavier, not just on the body, but on the soul. It's as if time itself had been chained to the ground, unable to move forward. Kale walked among the wreckage of old capsules, each marked with symbols of races that no longer remembered their own names. Here, even words die slowly, but something was in the air, something that wasn't wind, wasn't dust. It was attention. The planet was watching, or something inside it was. And Kale felt, deep in his exile. That this would not be just a story of survival. It would be the beginning of something much deeper. Something even the darkness couldn't hide for long. There was no trial, only a cold, impersonal broadcast. Kale Draven, traitor of intergalactic peace, accomplice in the destruction of the Zyran fleet, condemned to exile on Noxion, indeterminate, irrevocable. But he knew the truth: the fleet was destroyed under orders from the Council itself. Kale was only the soldier, the obedient commander. When the consequences spiraled out of control, someone had to pay. And he was the perfect scapegoat. War hero, symbol of unification, easy to worship, and even easier to crucify. The exile ship didn't slow as it entered Noxion's atmosphere. It simply opened 1,000 meters above the ground. The impact was brutal, bones shattered, blood mixed with black dust, but he survived. Between pain and numbness, Kale crawled into a shallow cave and remained still for 2 full days, watching, thinking, calculating. There were no guards, no fences. The prison was the planet itself. Imperial orbital cameras ensured no one escaped. But inside Noxion, chaos was by design. There were no rules, only survival. Kale noticed the bodies, some still fresh, others fossilized, twisted into grotesque silhouettes. It wasn't just the weather. It wasn't just the nocturnal beasts. It was the prisoners themselves, organized into invisible factions, marked by unspoken borders. Every step he took from then on could be his last. But Kale was not exiled to die, not inside. And if the Empire wanted him to vanish in Noxion's silence, he would do the opposite. He would make his name echo. Noxion wasn't empty. It pulsed. In every half-buried ruin, every forgotten cave, every vortex of shadowy gas, something watched. And Kale would soon discover that Noxion's eternal night hid more than monsters. It harbored broken civilizations, fragments of empires that time chose to erase. The first presence he sensed wasn't seen, it was heard. The Van, beings who evolved in total darkness, with abyssal skin and senses shaped by fear. They hunted by precision, not by sight, but by sound. And the faster your heart beat, the faster they came. Kale had heard whispers of fangs that sang when slicing flesh. Night, to the Van, was an eternal hunting ground. But they were not alone. There were the Shalf, untouchable, invisible under any direct light. Their voices didn't pass through ears, but minds, like mental waves that made the blood vibrate. They spoke in codes of intent, and a single misread idea could mean death. Kale realized the Shelf didn't live in territories. They lived in states of collective consciousness to humans. That was indecipherable, but to him it was an advantage. Then came the Dren, amphibious hybrids with translucent skin and biomechanical armor fused into their bodies. Refugees from an empire torn by internal wars, now divided into tribal clans and scattered traditions. Kale saw something familiar in them: wounded pride, misguided strength, and a deep, desperate longing to belong to something greater. And finally, there were the humans, or what remained of them: rebels, ex-military, political exiles, survivors of forgotten worlds, all thrown here, all lost to themselves. They lived in volatile groups, where a new leader rose and fell each week. They didn't recognize him. To them, Kale was just another condemned man, but he recognized them. And he knew that among this crowd of shadows and instinct, something flammable still lingered, something ready to ignite. Kale learned quickly: in Noxion, time isn't measured in hours. It's measured in decisions you survived. The planet's darkness wasn't just the absence of light. It was strategy. It was language. It was a battlefield. And in it, conflicts didn't explode, they whispered. Every move was a calculated risk. Every alliance, a game of masks. Kale started small. A gesture here, a simulated rescue there. A silence held at the right moment. He watched like a predator, but moved like a ghost. Among the Dren, he respected ancient runes of command. Among the Shelf, he learned to communicate with subtle thoughts. With the Van, he learned to breathe calmly, to never show fear. And among the humans, he reignited something that seemed extinct: discipline. It wasn't declared leadership. It was invisible influence, like the gas currents that shaped Noxion's underground dunes. He moved the pieces without them noticing. Groups began to form at first for survival, but over time, for purpose. Rumors emerged of a new prisoner who didn't seem broken, who spoke to Van and lived, who walked among the Dren without being hunted, who had been exiled. For knowing too much, the shadows began to shift. Kale didn't use weapons. He used stories, stories of an empire that kept Noxion as a theater of control, of races kept divided, to ensure they never united, of an opportunity rising, rare as an eclipse in a world without sun. Some didn't believe. Others had already lost everything, and they began to listen. In the shadow game, Kale moved in silence, and each fallen piece he repositioned, closer to the center, closer to the spark. It wasn't a map or an excavation that revealed the truth. It was a communication error, an old radio signal, intercepted by chance, repeating a coded message. Rupture at stage 3. Subjects show cooperative tendencies. Noxion remains controlled. Kale froze. Rupture. That word didn't belong to penal vocabulary. It was lab language of scientists, of distant observers. He replayed the message over 20 times. It wasn't a distress call. It was a report. Noxion wasn't just a place of exile. It was a test, a long-term experiment to analyze the social limits of fractured civilizations. Everything made sense now. The endless cycle of conflict, the engineered scarcity, the surveillance systems disguised as ruins. Even the electromagnetic storms seemed coordinated to sustain tension. Kale formed a hypothesis. The rupture theory. Noxio was designed to study the exact moment when rival species would stop destroying one another and begin to cooperate. The Empire watched everything, hoping the experiment would fail, that natural hatred would keep all races apart. But if by any reason the rupture occurred, if unity arose, they would erase it all. Nothing could escape Imperial control, not even hope. Kale knew the spark was lit, but now he also knew a silent countdown loomed above them. If rupture was detected, The next phase wouldn't be observation. It would be annihilation. And so, he had to move faster. In the obsidian caves, beneath Noxion's unstable crust where Imperial sensors couldn't reach, something that was never meant to happen was called forth. A meeting, not a war, not an ambush, but a conversation. Kale named it the Shadow Council, not because it was secret, but because it was improbable. 4 representatives, 4 living scars of broken civilizations. Velath, Alpha of the Varn, eyes like bottomless voids, voice vibrating with the weight of generations buried in hunger and fear. Cyril, the Shalf, a pulsing shadow who spoke with no sound, but invaded every mind with memories of the void. Omdar, the Dren, sheathed in translucent plates and living circuits, bearing an ancestral fragment pulsing with forgotten amphibian energy. And Kale, the condemned human, the traitor, the visionary. The tension was palpable, like the very gravity of Noxion was trying to crush that fragile attempt at unity. The first words exchanged were veiled threats, the second, shared memories. But it was the third round that changed everything. When Kale revealed the truth about the experiment, he showed the signal, revealed the patterns, exposed the fake ruins, the hidden drones, the induced storms. You were not forgotten, he said. You were placed here, like pieces in a cynical puzzle. The silence that followed wasn't hostility. It was recognition. Each of them, in their own language, understood they weren't enemies. They were test subjects, and there, under the flickering light of plasma crystals, a silent pact was made. Not a formal alliance, but a decision. If they're watching us, then let them witness the impossible. Kale knew the war would still come. But now, it wouldn't be between species. It would be against those above. What began underground rose on Noxion's corroded surface, where the sky feels heavier than the atmosphere itself, and the storms carry enough electricity to erase memories. Something new began to echo among the exiled. Whispers, not orders, not promises, but ideas. Ideas that spread like radiation, silent, invisible, impossible to contain. A Varn refused to hunt a human. A Shalf sent non-hostile signals to a rebel base. A group of Dren shared water with another clan. Small gestures, almost ridiculous, but on Noxion, even the smallest act of empathy is a rupture. Kale did not lead with speeches. He planted internal conflict. He knew that hatred between species was programmed, encouraged, nurtured, and he also knew that to break the cycle, he needed something more dangerous than weapons. Faith, not blind faith in gods or empires, but faith in each other, in the possibility that even here, even on a planet where the sun never rises, there could still be choice. And then came the symbols, paintings on rocks, codes etched into the holes of ruins, 3 jagged marks, representing Noxion's unstable triple orbits, a symbol of disorder, now reimagined as a banner. The first to follow him were called fools. Weeks later, they were called dangerous, and when they intercepted an Imperial transmission, they were called a real threat. The rebellion, once hypothetical, now had shape. A name, direction. The exile didn't seek redemption, they wanted to prove that oblivion does not extinguish the fire of the betrayed. And there, atop the towers of abandoned surveillance, a new kind of flame was lit, not one of destruction, but of calling. The voices of the surface were ready to scream. For entire cycles, Noxion was nothing but a shadow on the star map, a forgotten coordinate, a statistic of exile. But when the Empire's sensors detected a network anomaly from the surface, something changed. They heard a transmission. Not encoded, not accidental, but deliberate. We are not prisoners, we are survivors who remembered how to create. And when creation is born in the heart of forgetting, it cannot be erased. The veil that once masked Noxion as a remote prison dropped. It was no longer a dumping ground for failures. It was a rebel beacon. The High Council reacted with the instinct of all dying empires: immediate violence, a fleet of orbital probes was launched, each armed with pulsing charges, programmed to obliterate any sign of unification. But the Empire didn't count on what Kale had built, not just alliances, but strategic resilience. The ruins became jammers. The once toxic soil was turned into tactical fuel, the old control towers, reactivated as atmospheric disruption posts. For the first time, the Empire hesitated, and when power hesitates, it bleeds. The species once locked in internal war now stood side by side, resisting as one living organism. And each explosion didn't extinguish hope. It revealed another. The Varn howled in synchronized mantras. The Shalf bent light to confuse the probes. The Dren projected liquid shields around the central caverns. And the humans, they broadcast everything. Not to the Empire, but to the outer systems, to the edges of the galaxy, to the other forgotten. The truth surfaced. Noxion was an experiment, but now it was a mistake out of control. In the heart of the Galactic Council, a single councillor stood and whispered, "Perhaps it's time to shut Noxion down. But even if they destroy the planet, the echoes have already travelled. And on every world where the light of hope had gone dark, someone heard it. The transmission echoed through outlaw orbits and abandoned satellites. Forgotten names, ancient codes, and dead frequencies began to respond. What began as a whisper on Noxion now roared at the edges of the galaxy. But Kale knew, noise isn't revolution. Being heard is easy. Being followed takes the impossible, unifying the impossible. 4 species, 4 traumas, 4 views of the universe. The Varn guided by instinct and ritual hunts. The Shalf lost in labyrinthine minds. The Dren torn between pride and pragmatism. And the humans, disorganized, distrustful, broken. Kale wasn't a born leader. He was a soldier forged by betrayal. But maybe that was exactly what made him the perfect link. He knew the pain of every side. In an ancient subterranean chamber where metal met stone and ruin, he summoned the surviving representatives of each faction. Not to impose, but to listen. Pain divided us, but it's also what makes us the same. I didn't come to ask for trust. I came to show that alone. We've already died once. The silence was long. And then, for the first time in countless cycles, the Shalf responded with sound. The Varn lowered their ceremonial blades. The Dren let their reactors pulse in harmony with the chamber. And the humans listened in silence. In that chamber, a pact was sealed. No blood, no signature. Just one gesture. Each revealed their weakness. From that moment on, the rebellion structure ceased to be organic. It became tactical, symmetrical, unstoppable. The Varn masters of ambush, the Shalf creators of dimensional illusions, the Dren architects and strategists, the humans bridges between worlds. It was the last chance for balance. Not just for Noxion, but for the universe to witness the impossible function. On the dark surface of the planet, a new symbol was burned into the ground, not of domination, but of union. 4 interlinked marks, with a void at the center. The void was Kale, the nothing that made everything possible. And the Empire, for the first time in its history, didn't know how to attack, because there was no army. There was an idea. And ideas, when fueled by pain and purpose, cannot be destroyed. Noxion's darkness had never been just the absence of light. It was presence. It was weight. A living veil that crushed wills and devoured ideals. But now it trembled, not from a frontal attack, not from explosions, but from something the Empire never predicted: organization among the broken, trust among the fallen, hope among the condemned. The first waves of sabotage came at whispers: disabled generators, tampered drones, surveillance feeds showing false footage. The Varn struck without leaving a trace. The Shalf distorted routes and perceptions. The Dren reprogrammed security protocols, like playing an ancient instrument. And the humans ignited fear in the hearts of Imperial officers, reminding them of what they had forgotten, what it feels like to fight for something real. Kael Draven didn't command from a throne. He led from the front line, scars exposed, with the voice of someone who's lost everything and fears losing nothing. When the Imperial transports attempted to evacuate the administrative elites of Noxion, they found their routes blocked by a biotechnological interference field, something impossible. Until the Dren made it possible. In the final hour, Kael climbed the central communication tower, not to declare victory, but to issue a warning. What was buried here has bloomed. You built a hell expecting it to consume the condemned, but you forgot that it's in the fire that stars are forged. The Empire's last defenses fell that night. Or perhaps they simply surrendered, disoriented by something their sensors could not detect. Collective consciousness. At the heart of Noxion, where once there had been a testing ground, there now stood a beacon, forged not of light, but of purpose. The transmissions of the new Noxion spread through forgotten trade routes, pirate lanes, and dead channels. They didn't call for war. They didn't seek power. They simply said, "We are alive. We are free. And now we know we were never alone." Kael never sought to rule. He vanished into the underground sectors, where others began to build a new order. But on Noxion's walls, beneath the sunless sky, a phrase was carved, repeated in every language, once used to fuel hatred. "In the darkness, we became light to one another." And even if the Empire tries again to extinguish that spark, it no longer belongs to just one world. It belongs to those who survived oblivion and turned it into a future.